Right, so that in our previous segment, we talked about how we could predict how bad a flood is going to be based on previous floods. And one of the conclusions that we came to was just don't build on places where it's going to be prone to flooding. Well, is there anything that we could do to where we could build on those places and still not have to worry so much about the flooding part? And yes, we can. So one thing that we could do is we could build levees. Now, nature builds natural levees so that if you have a river, so this is the cross-sectional area of the river, then we found out that the river will deposit materials on either side of it, and then this is a natural levee that is going to keep the water in the channel during flood stage. So humans have built artificial levees. So these were natural, and then humans have built much larger ones that are going to keep the floodwaters in there. Now this has its own problems because one of the things that happens when you do have a flood is it brings in silt, and then that makes the soil, it enriches it and makes it easier to have agriculture in it. So if you're keeping all of that silt and all of that water in the channel, then there's none that's going to be over here and over here, and so your crops are not going to be as good because they're not getting all of that fresh silt being put on them. Another thing that's going to happen is that the water is going to be flowing faster in this channel whenever it's full of water, and that's going to cause more erosion. And so what can happen is that these levees can be undercut by the flowing water in the channel so that the levees collapse. Another thing, a bad thing about it is, now let's say that it's a really, really bad flood and it overtops these artificial levees. So it does flood. Well, now how can the water get back into the channel? So it's stuck. So sometimes farmers have blown up these levees in order to allow the water to go back in there, but then that has the problem of flooding the farms that are further downstream. Okay, another thing that you can do though is restoration of wetlands. So the idea is that here is the river, and then we allow this area over here and this area over here to become wild, and we don't build on it, and so this area is now going to have lots of vegetation, lots of root systems, and then those root systems are going to help hold the soil in place so that there's going to be less erosion occurring. Okay, another thing that we could do is we can build artificial walls next to a river that will keep erosion from occurring. Problem with this though is rivers are pretty stubborn, and so what they will do is they will start to undercut these erosion control walls so that they eventually collapse. I wanted to give you a case in point for the Missouri River. So in the upper left-hand corner shows what did the river originally look like. And you can see that the river is really wide. The river floods a lot. Now all that they did was that they, here is the original width of the river here. And then what they did was they pounded into the ground some basically stakes like this. And so what that did was it slowed the river down. So as the river was traveling in this direction here, it would encounter these stakes that had been pounded into the river, and so it slowed down. Now what does a river do with its sediment when it slows down? It drops it. So that this part over here began to fill in with materials. And you can see that over the course of years, how the Missouri River, the channel got straighter and the channel got deeper over here, whereas on this side over here, it eventually got filled in with sediment, and now it's farmland. Now the problem though is, since this side over here now has more water in it and is traveling faster, there's going to be more erosion on this side. And so the Army Corps of Engineers, every few years, they have to come through. They have to artificially straighten out the river. They fill in places where its erosion is occurring too much. They take the sediment, they put it in places where there's not enough sediment. So it's just an ongoing battle with the river in order to do this. All right, we got one more segment here. How do humans impact rivers? And we'll get to that in the next segment.